America punishes China, thinking it would cancel them. But who knew the little brother would rise up and become a tech superpower, stressing out the whole industry? For a long time, the US has been the big brother in the semiconductor industry. Intel, AMD, Texas Instruments, and countless other giants all hail from the US. They not only dominate the technology, but also control the global semiconductor market, making the whole world tip its hat in admiration. The US is the big brother, right? They were born to dominate semiconductor technology, bringing the world powerful processors, cutting-edge chips, and of course, cash flowing into their banks. But then, China, a name once in the shadows, started to rise up, noticing the $700 billion semiconductor pie being sliced, and thought, why not take a slice? The US could not let a younger sibling, who had contributed nothing to the industry, suddenly ask for a piece of the pie. That's when the US decided to act. They weren't about to let China step into their game. What did the US think? I can't let my little brother beat me. And thus, sanctions were set in motion. First came the ban. The US decided to hit hard, tightening by restricting exports to 140 Chinese companies. Even China's chip-making equipment manufacturers like Nora Technology Group didn't escape, with companies like Biotech and Cycarrier Technology being threatened too. Did the US think they would crush China's dreams? They were wrong. China didn't cry, whine, or post a threatening message on Truth Social like some others would. Instead, China flipped the script. Rather than submit, they stood tall and declared, "Sanctions? We will turn that into motivation." And just like that, China injected $410 billion into the semiconductor R&D sector. Imagine this. The US boycotts, but China plays back with an aggressive strategy, pumping money into technology, building a self-sustaining semiconductor ecosystem, and not stopping there. They cut down imports from the West, leaving the US shocked as they lost the massive semiconductor market of their own. In 2024, China reduced semiconductor imports from the US and other Western countries by almost 50%. At this point, the US didn't know what to do, as China stood firm in the semiconductor game without relying on anyone. The world suddenly had a new king in the semiconductor tech world. By now, the US was probably in shock. The sweet semiconductor pie they once held tightly in their hands was now slipping away. The US sat there, like an older brother looking at his younger sibling from behind, realizing that they had messed everything up. When China became the major chip producer, the US couldn't believe it. The sanctions that were supposed to slow China down only fueled their younger siblings' passion. China's global semiconductor market share doubled from 15% to 30%, and now the US was faced with the painful truth. China was no longer the little brother. They had become a formidable competitor in the tech industry. Now, China wasn't just learning the lessons. They were acing them. Not only were they producing 7-nanometer chips, but they had also surpassed Intel and TSMC in the chip technology race. The US and Western companies must be eating their dust as they watch China make huge strides in the semiconductor industry. But China didn't stop there. They made breakthroughs in NAND flash memory technology. YMTC, a Chinese company, is now producing 232-layer NAND flash memory, a superior technology that the US can't keep up with. Now China is not only self-producing chips, but is also leading in storage technology. The US, at this point, isn't just being left behind. They're now watching China smile triumphantly. Now, the US is left staring at China from behind, as China has developed strong capabilities and is ready to take the lead in the semiconductor industry. China didn't just beat the US, but also made companies like ASML and Applied Materials uncomfortable as they found themselves caught between complying with sanctions and maintaining profits from China. The US is no longer number one. China is ready to take the throne in the semiconductor tech industry, and the US can only watch. The world has changed, and China is no longer just the younger sibling. They are the big challenger the US now faces.
Everybody, what do you think of my hat? All right, I'm gonna sign the hat and I'm gonna throw it out.
Wearing a cheese hat, handing out cash, paying for selfies, and still losing big, Elon Musk just redefined venture capital Wisconsin style. When Elon Musk tried investing in the Supreme Court and got a supremely bad return. In a special election in Wisconsin, Judge Susan Crawford, considered the Democracy candidate, defeated Brad Schemel, the MAGA-friendly candidate, and especially friendly with Elon Musk's wallet. The billionaire and associated groups poured over $19 million into Schemel's campaign, nearly 10 times the amount contributed by George Soros. Not stopping at massive spending, Musk was reportedly handing out cash to people taking selfies near polling places. At this point, political advertising reached the level of cash in envelope after selfie. However, the investment didn't pay off. Susan Crawford won in a landslide and was announced the victor live on MSNBC by Rachel Maddow. MAGA's collective denial. It's not Musk's fault, it's... Less than 10 minutes after the defeat, MAGA-aligned media channels began spinning colorful versions of the story.
You've got George Soros and J.D. Pritzker and Reid Hoffman and all these billionaires who've spent far more than Musk did in this, and now pointing and saying, well, wait a minute.
I don't think they spent on this. They didn't.
Well, collectively,
Musk
if you look at all.
Meanwhile, Scott Jennings insisted.
Well, I could look at it from another direction. I think the Schemel campaign was really struggling, both financially and just in terms of traction before Musk got involved. He may have actually.
And yet, the entire MAGA plus Musk network couldn't stop Brad Schemel from ending with,
"Thank you guys, from the bottom of my heart."
Susan Crawford, from Chippewa Falls to defeating Elon Musk. Susan Crawford didn't need a billionaire's wallet to win voters' hearts. Standing on stage, she said simply,
"As a little girl growing up in Chippewa Falls, I never could have imagined that I'd be taking on the richest man in the world."
It wasn't just a thank you. It was a declaration for elections where justice cannot be priced. She continued,
"Standing up for our fundamental rights and freedoms, protecting Wisconsin families and communities."
MAGA and the midterm panic, the dangerous 60-seat problem. More than just a state-level loss, the Wisconsin election has Republican leaders sweating in the middle of winter. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries pointed out,
plus 30 district where the margin was cut in half, and we'll see.
In the power game of Washington, a 5% voter drop can sometimes mean losing 100% of a seat. When Stephen Miller redefines justice, one court per immigrant? No way. And if you thought the comedy ended with Musk's cheese hat, Stephen Miller stepped in as the perfect supporting character to close this political climax. His statement could be seen as an attempt to redefine America's legal system.
Whether or not we can send them home. How about hell no? How about we pick them up and we get them out of this country so they can't hurt anyone else?
That argument might fit in the plot of Escape from America, but it's hard to apply in a society built on rule of law and independent justice.
Ontario says it will slap a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the U.S.
$70 billion in crude oil, 9 billion cubic meters of LNG, and now electricity? Canada holds all the keys to turn off the lights, and the U.S. will Washington surrender? When Ontario, the largest industrial province in Canada, announced it would impose a 25% tariff on electricity exports to the U.S., in reality, Canada had gained control of one of the strongest cards in this economic battle. Electricity in many U.S. states could go dark if Ottawa decides to halt exports. Not just electricity. Canada also supplies nearly 1/5 of the crude oil imported by the U.S., worth over $70 billion each year. In fact, 9 billion cubic meters of LNG from Canada are the lifeblood for many U.S. states during the winter. Ottawa's message is clear.
If the Trump administration falls through on any more tariffs, we will immediately apply a 25% surcharge on the electricity we export. We will not hesitate to shut off their power as well.
The energy relationship between these two countries has now become a dangerous gamble. Not only threatening with energy, Carney targeted the automotive industry, a sector where Canada and the U.S. have a close relationship. In 2024, Canada exported over $30 billion USD worth of cars and parts to the US. Immediately after Trump imposed a 25% tariff on imported cars, Canada responded by revoking tax incentives for US electric vehicles, particularly those from Tesla. This could cause car prices in the US to soar, while also triggering a parts crisis in auto plants in Detroit, driving production costs to unprecedented levels. Carney bluntly stated,
"The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over."
The US and Canada conduct nearly $45 billion worth of agricultural trade each year, primarily in canola, wheat, meat, and dairy. With Carney's latest move, Canada is threatening to impose retaliatory tariffs on canola, a product valued at $6 billion USD annually. This could cause the prices of meat and dairy in U.S. supermarkets to skyrocket, driving food inflation to new heights. Experts warn, if Canada truly shuts off the agricultural valve, American citizens will feel the impact immediately through their daily grocery bills. Not only stopping at retaliating with tariffs, Carney quickly initiated negotiations with European and Asian countries, seeking alternative markets to the U.S. In fact, preliminary agreements were made with France and the UK regarding energy and automotive supply chains, opening up opportunities for Canada to step out from under the shadow of the U.S. When EU media asked, "Is Canada moving away from the shadow of the U.S.?" Carney answered clearly,
We will need to dramatically reduce our reliance on the United States. We will need to pivot our trade relationships elsewhere. And we will need to do things previously thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen.
A strong message. Canada is not just striking back, but is restructuring its economic strategy. From energy, automobiles, to agriculture, Canada is using powerful economic strikes to break down Trump's tariff war. Prime Minister Carney and the Canadian government have shown no hesitation in implementing retaliatory measures and are building an independent strategy to no longer rely on the U.S. How will Washington respond? Can Canada form strong trade alliances with Europe and Asia to reduce reliance on the U.S.? The U.S. may face a serious economic crisis if Canada's retaliatory measures are fully implemented. These economic strikes will not only disrupt markets, but could completely alter the North American economic order. This is a major turning point, a trade war that could change the economic future of both nations. Make America great again. Or is it actually destroying America from within? One advisor boldly claims
tariffs or tax cuts.
But the truth? That's a blatant lie. So the real question is this still a strategy? Or are we witnessing an economic disaster disguised as a plan? This past Sunday, supporters of America's 45th president received 3 urgent emails, back-to-back, highly personalized, and deeply alarming. At the very same time, something unusual happened on national television. The Commerce Secretary, once the official spokesperson for Trump's economic agenda, was suddenly missing. In his place,
we had hoped to speak to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick today, but the White House declined our request. We do hope to have him on in the near future.
In his place, a former White House advisor, previously convicted for contempt of Congress, now back on air, defending Trump's tariff policies. His bold claim? Tariffs are tax cuts. The pushback was immediate. Economists fired back. Tariffs are not tax cuts. They're direct costs added to imports that U.S. consumers eventually pay through higher retail prices. Later in the program, former Chief Economic Advisor Kevin Hassett, known for forecasting markets, was asked, "What's coming next?" His reply, "I don't know what's going to happen this week." That uncertainty shook investors, especially as China, South Korea, and Japan announced a tightened trade alliance aimed at countering U.S. tariffs. Experts are now warning, if the instability continues, America could face a dangerous wave of stagflation, economic recession, coupled with rising inflation. In a televised phone interview, the former leader of the White House delivered a shocking statement. "I really do want a third term." The remark flew in the face of the U.S. Constitution, which strictly limits any president to just 2 terms. Around the same time, a federal judge, who had previously blocked the deportation of refugees, was suddenly stripped of access to national security intelligence, according to case files. The refugees had legal grounds to seek asylum, yet were secretly transferred to a Central American nation for detention. Several reports described the conditions inside those facilities as unsafe, with severe humanitarian risks. Then came the leaked audio. A voice, believed to be from a close Trump advisor, said, "I don't care who they are, they'll die there." While the authenticity is still under review, the statement has already ignited fear about how immigration policies were handled behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham posted a smiling photo, playing golf with the former commander-in-chief, boasting about a private tournament win. For millions of Americans struggling with rising prices and daily uncertainty, that image felt completely disconnected from reality. One of the core campaign promises from the former New York businessman was to protect workers and veterans. But in reality, tens of thousands of federal employees were laid off. Multiple Social Security offices were shut down. At the same time, USAID funding was slashed, leaving nearly 1 million children at risk of losing access to medical aid and food, according to humanitarian organizations. But what triggered the most backlash was a social media post, allegedly from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. A clip of dancing pallbearers, captioned, "Megan, 1, the libs 0. The video was immediately condemned, seen by many as mocking a humanitarian crisis. One former Trump supporter put it bluntly, "I feel betrayed." And when asked whether tariffs are really tax cuts, Congressman Jody Arrington replied, "It's like renovating a house. Messy at first, but it gets better." But for those who've lost their jobs, lost their benefits, and are watching costs spiral out of control, that metaphor no longer holds up, not when the house is already collapsing. A former senior official who once served inside the Trump administration has issued a sober warning. These recent actions could erode public trust in our democratic institutions and threaten the stability of the nation. Independent experts agree. Without clarity and transparency in policymaking, the damage won't stop at the economy. It could strike at the very core of America's system of governance. And the question still remains, if even those who were once on the inside are now sounding the alarm, then what's really waiting for America? The Lincoln Project's 8 parody videos where Trump is mercilessly mocked leave the president so angry that he throws his phone into the water. Trump and his uncontrolled rage. You probably can't imagine a president showing such outbursts of anger. While Trump continues to appear confident, sometimes even arrogant, in a series of parody videos by the Lincoln Project, he reveals his frustration and loss of control. The first scene in the video shows Trump walking onto the golf course, confident as if he's the master of the game. But when his shot fails, he starts blaming everything around him. The fake golf ball, the imperfect golf club. This scene becomes even more hilarious as Trump continuously criticizes everything around him, yet fails to recognize that his lack of control is the real issue. The caddy standing nearby can only shake his head, as if he's witnessing a mental breakdown right on the golf course. The loss of control doesn't end on the golf course. These hilarious situations not only make the audience laugh, but they also raise a big question. If someone can't control their emotions while playing golf, can they run a country with stability? When Trump fails to make the shot, he becomes even more angry, blaming everything, from the golf ball to the outside forces. Will he handle major national issues in the same way? By blaming and raging instead of finding solutions? But it doesn't stop there. As he faces failure, Trump becomes even more out of control. His second shot is even worse, and the golfers around him try to avoid looking at him, not wanting to become witnesses to the mental crisis unfolding. Finally, Trump loses it, throwing his expensive golf club to the ground, screaming about the injustice he has to endure. This scene becomes even more uncomfortable as Trump continues blaming the wind and terrain instead of accepting that it's his own lack of skills. The golfers around him silently watch, afraid to laugh or show sympathy because they know that this kind of rage could explode at any moment. When Trump lost Twitter, he became a social media addict. So, what happens when Trump can't use Twitter anymore? The next series of videos by the Lincoln Project shows Trump like a social media addict, aimlessly trying to regain the power he's lost. Unable to post on Twitter, Trump turns to other platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and even TikTok. This awkward attempt makes the viewers laugh, but could this be a sign of impotence when faced with reality? On Trump's face, we can clearly see the confusion when he realizes his Twitter account has been permanently locked. Instead of accepting the reality, he sinks deeper into anger, showing his disappointment and refusal to accept it. Not only that, Trump becomes even more confused when other platforms don't help him, causing him to scroll through apps as if he's searching for a savior. Every time he tries to open a new platform, his face becomes even more red, as if facing a world of technology he can't control. Finally, his frustration reaches its peak, and Trump can only continue to blame the outside forces instead of confronting the truth. His social media power has come to an end. In the end, in a fit of rage, Trump throws his expensive phone into the pond. A move that makes one wonder, does this action reflect his lack of leadership when faced with greater challenges and difficulties? What's notable is that, while Trump does this, he still confidently claims to have a stable temperament. But the reality is completely the opposite. These outbursts of anger, these uncontrolled actions are exactly why people are concerned about his leadership ability. The Lincoln Project wants to highlight this. If someone can't control their emotions while playing golf, how can they possibly face the big challenges of running a country? If someone can't control their anger on the golf course, can they handle the critical decisions of a country? Canada, a longtime energy partner, has shut down the $103 billion oil export pipeline to the U.S., leaving Washington unable to respond in time. Canada stops supplying oil and gas to the U.S. Canada, the largest energy supplier to the U.S., shocked Washington with its decision to halt energy exports. This immediately caused a surge in gas, oil, and electricity prices in the U.S., leading to unprecedented disruptions in the lives of millions of Americans. How will Americans cope with the rising prices of essential goods, including fuel, food, and public services? From daily commutes to flights, everything is being affected. The aviation industry faces increased fuel costs, while transport, manufacturing, and many other sectors are struggling due to the soaring energy prices. The reason behind Canada's decision: for years, the U.S. has imposed heavy trade tariffs on Canadian goods, believing that its neighboring country wouldn't dare to retaliate. But that belief is now being shattered. Canada had long warned that this could happen, yet Washington paid little attention. Eventually, a strategic shift was made. Canada not only stopped oil exports to the U.S., but also signed long-term contracts with other countries, particularly China and India, the two largest energy markets in the world. This is not just a political reaction, but also a long-term economic strategy to reduce dependence on the U.S. With these new agreements, Canada has opened the door to becoming one of the leading energy suppliers for major global economies, Europe and Asia, ready to replace the U.S. So when the U.S. suddenly loses its critical energy supply from Canada, who will step in to replace it? Europe and Asia have quickly stepped up. Canada has signed billion-dollar agreements to supply oil, gas, and electricity to countries in need of a stable energy source, especially Europe, which is seeking to replace energy supplies from Russia. At the same time, China and India have secured long-term agreements to ensure energy supplies for their rapidly growing economies. Canada's export ports and pipeline systems are now not only directed towards North America, but also shifting their energy flow towards Asia and Europe. This not only creates a massive shock for the U.S., but also completely changes the global energy balance. The U.S. now faces not only an energy crisis, but also loses its strategic position in the international energy competition. With the loss of hydroelectric supply from Canada, states like New York, California, and Michigan are facing the risk of rolling blackouts, especially during the winter months. Electricity prices have soared, and some regions are even considering implementing peak-hour usage restrictions to avoid overloads. Major industries, such as automobile, steel, and food production, are starting to cut production due to rising energy costs. This not only impacts the economy, but also threatens tens of thousands of jobs, particularly in energy-dependent sectors. Many businesses are facing severe profits decline, with some even closing down certain production facilities. This is forcing Americans to witness significant changes in their daily lives. from prices to job opportunities. The energy winter approaches. You've probably noticed the US is facing a challenging energy winter. Gas, oil, electricity, airline tickets, and goods have all surged in price. Families and businesses are shouldering unprecedented inflation, and everything is becoming more expensive than ever before. The electricity and fuel systems once dependent on Canada's supply are now paralyzed, rendering Washington's efforts almost futile. In reality, these events are forcing the US economy to face a significant shock, and it's hard to predict what will happen next. How many options does the US have left to deal with this crisis? Can Washington escape the energy crisis before it turns into a full-blown economic disaster? $390 billion pulled from US bonds. This isn't a protest. Allied countries are preparing for the financial storm, and the reason Trump is back. From Canada, China to Ireland, Norway, and even Japan, countries are rushing away from the US dollar as if they are preparing for a storm that's about to hit. The main cause: Trump's re-election has increased concerns among international leaders about the return of the America First policy. This policy not only brings higher tariffs, but also expands financial sanctions, threatening global stability. As U.S. interest rates rise, U.S. government bonds are no longer as attractive as before, since the low yields fail to compensate for the increased risks. The instability in economic and trade policies, especially after the Russia-Ukraine war and U.S.-China tensions, has led countries to reassess their financial strategies. Not only are they reducing their dependence on the US dollar, but many have also started to shift, seeking safer assets like gold, the euro, or even digital assets to protect their economies from increasingly unpredictable fluctuations. See the Allies' withdrawal wave. In the last 3 months of 2024, it wasn't just one or two countries, but a whole range of nations that carried out a massive sell-off. Brazil pulled out $55.9 billion. Ireland reduced $42 billion, while the Cayman Islands and Canada also decreased by $41.2 billion and $37 billion, respectively. India and Norway cut nearly $35 billion each, and even Japan and China reduced by $7.8 billion. This shows that countries no longer trust holding assets in U.S. bonds, despite the stability of the U.S. dollar. And this raises the question: are these nations preparing for a major shift in their financial strategies? Trump triggers global trade retaliation wave. Many believe this event is no accident. The re-election of Donald Trump and his return to the political scene could be the trigger for this wave. The America First policy he implemented during his first term, with high tariffs and the use of economic sanctions, caused concern among many countries. And now, with his return, no one can be certain what will happen next. Trump has announced a series of new tariff measures with a reciprocal policy starting April 2nd, 2025, aimed at retaliating against countries with high tariffs on U.S. goods. This not only threatens traditional allies, but also increases uncertainty in international trade relations. Reaction of countries. Countries are responding strongly to this move. The European Union, EU, has threatened to impose tariffs on iconic U.S. products like motorcycles, whiskey, and jeans, reminiscent of the trade war of 2018. China, not staying quiet, has raised tariffs on U.S. agricultural products, particularly soybeans and pork. And it doesn't stop there. Canada has also started public consultations to address $125 billion worth of U.S. goods. These actions not only increase tensions between countries, but also create a chain reaction, causing global markets to face increased uncertainty. The future of international trade will depend on how these nations control and adjust their strategies in response to the strong protectionist policies from the U.S. Impact on the U.S. and industries. The U.S. agricultural industry will face the risk of losing export markets as products like soybeans, corn, and pork could be affected by retaliatory tariffs. The U.S. automobile industry is not exempt either. The cost of parts will rise, with car prices potentially increasing by $1,000 to $3,000, leading to decreased consumer demand and potential job losses in states like Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, where the automobile industry plays a crucial role. Countries no longer believe that the U.S. is a safe haven for global finance. Will Trump's protectionist policies in his second term continue to cause major financial turmoil? Or will we witness a multipolar financial world, where the U.S. is no longer the center? Stay tuned to the video to understand this issue. In February 2025, the U.S. government shocked global markets by imposing a steep 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada, igniting a trade conflict unlike anything seen before. With over 80% of Mexico's exports directed toward the U.S., the response from Mexico was not only swift, but also strategic. And at the center of the storm, the auto industry, which accounts for 27% of Mexico's export value, now stands at serious risk. It all began when the U.S. administration tightened trade policies with major partners, aiming to protect domestic manufacturing and increase border control. But Mexico is not a minor player. The country is the top supplier of goods to the U.S., and its production network is deeply intertwined with the North American economy. As soon as the tariffs were announced, Mexico's markets went into shock. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum didn't hold back, declaring, "We will not accept this imposition." To reinforce her stance, Sheinbaum led a massive protest at Zocalo Square in Mexico City. Tens of thousands of people waved Mexican flags and chanted, "Mexico deserves respect." But Mexico's response wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. The Mexican government quickly engaged in diplomatic efforts to limit the fallout from the new tariffs. What followed was a high-stakes game of political and economic maneuvering that's still unfolding. Under intense pressure from businesses and the public, Mexico avoided an immediate escalation by turning to negotiation. Within weeks, President Sheinbaum met directly with the White House. The result? A temporary reprieve. The U.S. agreed to delay tariffs on goods covered under the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, until April 2nd. Mexico celebrated this as a win, but not a complete one. The U.S. government refused to lift tariffs on steel and aluminum, two critical materials for the auto industry. That decision has left North American automakers scrambling to adjust. Ford, GM, and Stellantis quickly raised alarms that rising production costs could lead to higher car prices and potential factory closures. The question now: how much damage can the industry absorb before it breaks? If you're planning to buy a new car soon, you might want to think twice. Ford has warned that tariffs could push the price of an F-150 truck up by as much as $12,000. GM and Stellantis have suggested they may need to reduce production or even shut down some plants to manage rising costs. Why the chaos? It comes down to the supply chain. The North American auto industry relies on an incredibly complex production network. Some auto parts cross the US-Mexico border up to 8 times before a car is completed. Every crossing under the new tariff means an extra cost, and that cost will be passed on to consumers. Electric vehicles, EVs, aren't immune either. Batteries, sensors, and electric motors, many sourced from Mexico, are about to get a lot more expensive. That's bad news for an industry that's already struggling to meet demand for affordable EVs. And it doesn't stop there. The tariffs have created a domino effect that's shaking the entire economy. As soon as the tariffs were announced, the financial markets took a hit. The Dow Jones dropped over 700 points in a matter of days. Meanwhile, the Mexican peso weakened by 5% against the US dollar, driving up domestic prices and adding pressure on Mexico's already fragile economy. But Mexico is not standing still. The Mexican government is aggressively pursuing new trade deals with Brazil, China, and other South American countries to reduce dependence on the US market. These moves could permanently alter trade flows across the Americas. Mexico has also hit back with retaliatory tariffs on key U.S. agricultural exports. Corn, soybeans, and avocados, major U.S. exports to Mexico, are now subject to steep Mexican tariffs. This is a major blow to farmers in Texas and California, who are already grappling with rising costs and uncertain market conditions. This conflict is far from over. The temporary tariff suspension under USMCA will expire on April 2nd, and if no resolution is reached, the full 25% tariffs will take effect across all sectors. Will Mexico and the U.S. find common ground, or are we headed toward a full-scale trade war? One thing is certain: the future of North America's auto industry and the broader economy is hanging in the balance. Stay tuned. Over $1.4 trillion vanished from the stock market in a matter of hours. Not because of a financial crisis, not because of war, but because of one statement from Donald Trump. Trump just stunned the world with a shocking announcement about Greenland? But why is Greenland so important? Why is Wall Street in full-blown panic mode? In a surprise press conference, Donald Trump announced that the U.S. already has military presence in Greenland and may send even more troops. This statement immediately sparked fears of a new conflict in the Arctic, a region already under intense geopolitical competition.
Very important. You know, we have a couple of bases on Greenland already, and we have quite a few soldiers, and maybe you'll see more and more soldiers go there. I don't know.
The stock market reacted instantly. The Dow Jones plummeted by 540 points. The S&P 500 neared correction territory. Investors fear that the U.S. may be dragged into an unnecessary military buildup. At a time when the economy is already struggling with inflation, supply chain disruptions, and global instability. Trump didn't stop with military expansion. He revived his 2019 idea of purchasing Greenland. Despite Denmark previously rejecting it outright, he even went further, suggesting that Canada would function best as an American state, a statement that shocked allies and raised serious diplomatic tensions. NATO leaders responded immediately. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte firmly rejected Trump's idea, stating that NATO has no role in supporting such an outrageous plan. Meanwhile, Greenlanders voiced strong opposition. A survey found that 85% of Greenland's population opposed any attempt to become part of the U.S. One Greenland resident made it clear, "We are not a product for sale."
Vision for the potential annexation of Greenland and getting the potential.
Yeah. Well, I think it'll happen, and I'm just thinking, I didn't give it much thought before, but I'm sitting with a man that could be very instrumental. You know, Mark, we need that for international security, not just security, international.
Yes. And basically, I don't know what he's aiming at.
Og jeg kan læne mig fuldstændig op af Kim Kielsens udtalelse. Selvfølgelig er Grønland ikke til salg, og i øvrigt er Grønland ikke Danmarks. Altså Grønland er grønlændernes.
After Trump's series of shocking statements, the U.S. financial markets went into free fall. Within just one day, the Dow Jones collapsed by over 1,400 points, officially turning negative for the year. Major corporations took a massive hit. Apple plunged 5.7%. Nvidia crashed 6.1%. JP Morgan dropped 5.9%. Even the S&P 500 broke below its 200-day moving average, triggering a wave of panic selling across Wall Street. Many financial experts are now warning that if Trump continues with his unpredictable policies, the U.S. could enter a mild recession by late 2025. The Federal Reserve may be forced to cut interest rates earlier than expected, to prevent a deeper economic collapse. Meanwhile, the Biden administration and Democratic leaders may have to step in to counteract the economic and diplomatic chaos triggered by Trump's latest moves. So, what should investors do now? Hold cash reserves. Avoid major investments in tech and finance for now. Focus on energy and defense stocks. These sectors could benefit from the geopolitical turmoil. Watch for Federal Reserve signs. Any move to stabilize interest rates could shift market dynamics. Don't look away. What comes next could directly impact you. Is Trump really controlling trade with Canada, or is he just panicking? Trump once again announces tariffs on Canada, but within 24 hours, he quickly backs down. Is this a calculated strategy or a sign of panic? Will Canada retreat, or will they strike back even harder? The upcoming developments are far from simple. Trump's cycle of threats and retractions. Every time trade tensions escalate, Trump threatens tariffs on Canada. One day, he announces increased tariffs on steel and aluminum. The next, he suggests that Canada should become the 51st U.S. state. But when Canada pushes back, the market immediately reacts. Investors grow anxious. Stock indices take a hit. The American steel industry feels the pressure. And, as if following a script, Trump quickly changes his stance. One day, he insists he won't tolerate any harm to the U.S. economy. The next, he calls for calm, emphasizing that the two countries are allies. This isn't a one-time event, it's a familiar cycle. Threats, retaliation, market crash, retraction. But this time, Canada isn't backing down. Canada strikes back, not what Trump expected. Unlike previous disputes, Canada refuses to yield. Leaders from Parliament to Ontario Premier Doug Ford stand united. If Trump continues his tariff policies, Canada will retaliate even harder, and they don't just talk. they act. A series of countermeasures take effect. Canada bans certain U.S. imports, urges a boycott of American tourism, and within weeks, Canadian travel to the U.S. drops by 40%, costing the U.S. economy billions. This alarms the Trump administration. In response, they send one of Trump's closest trade advisors, Peter Navarro, to defuse the situation. Peter Navarro's weak playa. Peter Navarro appears on media platforms with a familiar message. Canada should stay calm and not overreact. But here's the issue. It was the U.S. that started this trade war. They imposed tariffs, they issued threats, and when Canada retaliates, they plead for peace. This repetitive cycle no longer signals a strong trade strategy. It reveals a lack of control and growing instability. Canada has seen these threats before. They understand that if they hold firm, Trump will eventually have to back down. Economic consequences. Is America hurting itself? The impact of Trump's inconsistent trade policies isn't just damaging U.S.-Canada relations. It's causing serious harm to the U.S. economy. Canadian tourism to the U.S. plummets. American exporters lose billions in revenue. Tourism-dependent states like Florida and California take a heavy hit. But the biggest problem isn't just the numbers, it's market confidence. Frequent trade policy shifts erode investor and business trust. When companies don't know what to expect, they hesitate to expand, invest, or hire. Financial markets, already sensitive to trade uncertainty, react negatively to inconsistent White House decisions. This chaos can trigger a domino effect, weakening global confidence in the U.S. economy. Trump's misinformation about tariffs. As economic pressure mounts, the Trump administration continues pushing a false narrative that tariffs protect American workers and save people money. They claim tariffs benefit the U.S. by forcing foreign nations to pay. But in reality, it's American consumers and businesses that bear the cost. Tariffs drive up import prices, making everyday goods more expensive for Americans. Companies relying on imported materials struggle, leading to layoffs and reduced operations. If tariffs were truly beneficial, why does Trump keep retracting them whenever the market reacts negatively? Global perception. Is America losing credibility? The world is watching closely. U.S. allies in Europe, Japan, and South Korea see the inconsistency in Washington's economic strategy. No long-term vision, no stability, just reactive, unpredictable decisions. Even more concerning, Trump recently called the U.S.-Canada border an artificial line, language eerily similar to Vladimir Putin's rhetoric about Ukraine. This isn't just about trade, it's about how the world perceives America's leadership. The question remains, is the U.S. undermining its own credibility on the global stage? And what consequences will follow? What happens next may surprise you. Ohio, from a red state to a swing state again? For over a decade, Ohio has been a Republican stronghold, but now frustration is growing. Trump's economic policies, job cuts, trade wars, and funding cuts are hitting Ohioans hard. Factories are closing, farmers are struggling, and federal jobs are disappearing. Even Republican leaders in Ohio are starting to push back. Has Trump's presidency hurt Ohio more than it helped? The Trump administration has introduced a series of inconsistent economic policies, leaving businesses and workers in Ohio in a state of uncertainty. Erratic tariff policies. Trump has repeatedly imposed, removed, and then reimposed tariffs on major U.S. trading partners, including China, Canada, and Mexico. As a result, Ohio's key agricultural industries, including soybeans, corn, pork, dairy, and wheat, have suffered severe losses due to retaliatory tariffs. Large farms in Ohio are struggling to export their goods, forcing many to shut down. CHIPS Act betrayal and the tech industry. The CHIPS Act, introduced under the previous administration, attracted billions of dollars in investment from Intel to Ohio, creating thousands of high-tech jobs. However, Trump recently announced his intention to eliminate the CHIPS Act, jeopardizing these jobs and Ohio's future in the technology sector. In Cleveland, thousands of federal employees at the VA, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, are facing layoffs. Widespread anxiety in the workplace. According to Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb, many federal workers in Ohio sit in conference rooms unsure if they will have a job tomorrow. This uncertainty is not just affecting Cleveland. Cities across Ohio are also struggling with federal budget cuts and job losses. Ohio farmers, from hope to disappointment. Trump promised to protect rural communities and farmers, yet his erratic trade policies have increased production costs and harmed exports. Ohio's agricultural sector now faces major losses due to retaliatory tariffs, especially from China. A fragile economic future. According to a Federal Reserve report from Atlanta, the U.S. economy is at risk of declining by nearly 3% GDP, raising fears of a potential recession. Many Ohio businesses are hesitant to hire new employees, concerned about the unpredictability of Trump's economic policies. Across Ohio, many former Trump supporters are turning away, realizing that his policies have not brought the promised benefits. False statements and misinformation anger Ohioans. In a recent speech, Trump claimed that Haitian immigrants had destroyed Springfield, Ohio. The Republican mayor of Springfield immediately refuted this statement, accusing Trump of spreading misinformation and creating unnecessary fear. Bipartisan pushback against Trump's policies, mayors from both the Democratic and Republican parties in Ohio are standing together to oppose policies that hurt their state. Even Ohio's Republican Governor Mike DeWine has spoken out in support of Ohioans, challenging Trump's economic mismanagement. Trump ignores the economy, focuses on long-winded speeches during his record-breaking 2-hour speech before Congress. Trump spent less than 5 minutes discussing the economy. Meanwhile, prices continue to rise, jobs are being cut, and Ohioans face growing financial struggles. Recent developments suggest that Ohio is no longer a guaranteed red state. Trump's unstable economic policies have harmed farmers, workers, and major cities. The Ohio community is losing trust, and this could lead to a major political shift in the next election. Will Ohio become a swing state once again? Don't take your eyes off the screen because the next revelations will shock you. U.S. markets lose $3.6 trillion. Canada strikes back. Is America backfiring on itself? Overnight, the U.S. market evaporates $3.6 trillion. Canada retaliates aggressively. American industries are in turmoil. Is this new tariff policy backfiring? U.S. raises tariffs. Trade war ignites on March 4, 2025. The U.S. administration officially enforces new tariffs. 25% on imports from Canada and Mexico. An additional 10% levy on Canadian energy. Tariffs on Chinese goods increased from 10% to 20%. Why? The U.S. government claims this move is to protect the national economy and curb illegal goods flowing from neighboring countries. But is this truly a victory? Within hours of the tariff policy taking effect, Canada strikes back. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau declares, if the U.S. imposes tariffs, Canada will retaliate immediately. And that's exactly what happened. Canada slaps a 25% tariff on $155 billion worth of U.S. goods, targeting key economic sectors. $30 billion taxed immediately, the remaining $125 billion to follow in 21 days. This is Canada's strongest trade response in history against the U.S. Canadian provinces fight back. Ontario. Doug Ford. Energy retaliation 25% tariff on electricity exports to the U.S., impacting 1.5 million homes in New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. Warning, complete power cutoff if tariffs remain in place by April. $100 million contract with Elon Musk's Starlink, canceled. Nova Scotia. Tim Houston. Blocking U.S. trade. Doubles toll fees for U.S. trucks crossing the province. Removes all American liquor from Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation shelves. Bans U.S. companies from bidding on government contracts. Alberta, Danielle Smith. Market diversion. Accuses the U.S. of sabotaging trade agreements. Declares reduced reliance on the U.S. expanding exports to Europe and Asia. Urges government investment in domestic military and manufacturing industries to break dependence on the U.S. Manitoba, Wabkinyu. Targeting consumer goods, bans American liquor from all Manitoba Liquor Mart stores, dealing a blow to the U.S. alcohol industry. Newfoundland and Labrador, Andrew Fury. Cutting business ties, reevaluating all procurement contracts with U.S. businesses. Shifting trade focus to Europe. Decreasing reliance on the U.S. Canada has never retaliated with such unified force before. U.S. financial markets crash. Within days of the U.S.-Canada tariff war escalating, the American financial markets collapse. Dow Jones plummets nearly 800 points, one of the biggest drops this year. S&P 500 and NASDAQ decline by 2%, entering correction territory. $3.6 trillion wiped out from the market, sending shockwaves through Wall Street. Industries hit the hardest. Automotive, Ford and GM face projected losses of $14 billion and $6 billion, respectively. Construction. The housing sector struggles with soaring costs due to taxed raw materials. Consumer goods. Americans now confront rising prices as import taxes take effect. Investors panic, shifting money into U.S. Treasury bonds for safety. This leads to lower bond yields, a classic signal of an impending economic recession. What will the U.S. do next? What will Washington do next? Will they retract tariffs to prevent further damage? Will they intensify pressure on Canada despite economic risks? Will they seek a new trade agreement? If the U.S. doesn't adjust its strategy soon, the world's leading economy may be headed for a deeper crisis than anticipated. Tesla is in big trouble. Canada just announced a 100% tariff on U.S. EVs, a move that could shake the entire auto industry. Canada is hitting Tesla hard with a 100% import tariff on American-made EVs. If this goes into effect, prices for Tesla vehicles in Canada could double, making them nearly impossible to afford. Right now, a Tesla Model 3 costs around $40,000, but with the new tariff, that could jump to $80,000. And here's the real danger. Tesla currently holds 70% of the U.S. EV market and was set to sell over 50,000 cars in Canada this year. But at these prices, Canadian buyers will likely turn away, shifting instead to Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes, brands that are not affected by this tariff. This is not just about losing sales. The stock market is watching. If Tesla's Canadian market collapses, investor confidence could plummet, leading to a dropping stock price and even bigger financial trouble. And this isn't just Canada. If other countries see this and follow suit, Tesla could face global trade barriers that would crush its ability to grow internationally. The impact extends beyond just Tesla's stockholders. With higher costs and a shrinking market, Tesla may be forced to cut production, impacting jobs and operations at its U.S. manufacturing plants. As competition rises, this tariff could also slow down innovation in the EV sector, delaying new models and battery technology. If Tesla loses ground in Canada, it risks falling behind in the global EV race, giving competitors a huge advantage. But Tesla isn't alone. This tariff could send shockwaves across the entire U.S. auto industry. Canada produces over 2 million vehicles per year, many of which are exported to the U.S. If tensions escalate, American auto giants like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler could be next in line for trade restrictions. Here's what could happen next. Factories shut down, leading to thousands of job losses. Supply chains break, causing delays and higher costs. Car prices spike, making vehicles even more expensive for American consumers. U.S. car manufacturers could lose their competitive edge as costs rise and production slows. Export markets may shrink, forcing American automakers to rely solely on domestic sales, further limiting growth. And if Canada retaliates with tariffs on steel, aluminum, and auto parts, U.S. manufacturing costs will soar, making it harder for automakers to compete. The North American auto industry is worth $50 billion a year. And this tariff fight could be the biggest disruption in decades. Without a resolution, smaller auto suppliers may shut down. Dealerships could struggle, and workers across the industry will feel the impact. The effects of this tariff war won't just hit big corporations. They'll trickle down to everyday Americans, making cars harder to afford and jobs more uncertain. If this turns into a full-blown trade war, it could take years to recover. And by then, the global auto industry may have already moved on, without the U.S. leading the way. While the U.S. is raising tariffs, Canada is expanding its trade network, ensuring that it's not dependent on the American market. One example, the CETA trade agreement between Canada and the EU. This has already boosted Canada-EU trade past $100 billion a year, giving Canadian businesses access to new markets. And it doesn't stop there. 97% of Canada's oil exports once went to the US. But now, Canada is shifting toward Japan and China. And here's the real power move. Canada's critical minerals alliance with the EU, securing key resources like lithium, cobalt, and nickel, materials that the US relies on for its EV and tech industries. This isn't just about today. Canada is setting itself up for the future, making sure it has options while the US risks falling behind. By diversifying its trade, Canada strengthens its economy, making it less vulnerable to US policies. This also gives Canada more leverage in future negotiations, reducing the impact of American trade decisions. If this trend continues, the US could see a steady decline in influence, while Canada builds stronger global partnerships that support long-term growth. This tariff battle is more than just Tesla. It's a sign that US trade dominance is slipping. If America doesn't adapt, it could find itself left behind as other nations build stronger alliances. So, is this just a trade dispute, or are we watching a shift in global economic power? Elon Musk and the political game. Who really benefits? Can you believe it? A $2.4 billion US government contract was quietly shifted from Verizon to Elon Musk's SpaceX, a highly controversial decision even among Musk's supporters. How did SpaceX manage to secure this lucrative deal? And why are all investigations into Musk and his companies seemingly disappearing? The $2.4 billion FAA contract from Verizon to SpaceX. It all starts with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. The agency had previously awarded Verizon a $2.4 billion contract to modernize the U.S. air traffic communication system, an essential project ensuring the safety of millions of passengers every day. But then, an unexpected twist. The government is now considering canceling Verizon's contract and handing it over to SpaceX, Musk's company. Is this really about improving technology or just a strategic move to funnel billions more into Musk's empire? It's worth noting that Musk had publicly stated that he would avoid conflicts of interest. But is that really the case? A new form of corruption. Why are Musk's investigations disappearing? Beyond landing massive contracts, Musk seems to possess another remarkable ability, making all investigations into Tesla and SpaceX disappear. FAA had an ongoing investigation into a SpaceX rocket explosion. Now silence. Tesla was fined over $600,000 for safety violations. No one talks about it anymore. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, received over 300 complaints about Tesla. Its leadership was suddenly fired. Look at the agencies that once investigated Musk. Department of Justice, DOJ, Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, all of them had active investigations into Musk's businesses. And the result? Their leaders were replaced, fired, or stripped of power one by one. This isn't just a coincidence, it's part of a new corruption model. Remove those who stand in the way, then pave the path for unchecked business expansion. This raises critical questions. How has Musk managed to manipulate the system so effectively? Who is helping Musk dismantle regulatory barriers? Musk, Trump, and the power network. It's not just about government contracts. Musk is also benefiting from a deeply connected power structure. The SEC ordered Musk to pay $150 million for stock violations. The SEC chair was replaced. The Department of the Interior, DOI, clashed with Musk over environmental concerns. Now, the agency is powerless against him. The Federal Election Commission, FEC, was investigating Musk's political funding. Its leader was fired. Are all these just coincidences? Or is this an entirely new corruption model where those in power eliminate legal barriers for each other, creating an unstoppable business empire? Who truly benefits in the end? Elon Musk presents himself as a warrior against government corruption, but his actions tell a different story, one where legal barriers disappear to serve his business empire. A $2.4 billion FAA contract was awarded to Verizon. But now, without open competition, it's shifting to SpaceX. Is this really about innovation or just another strategic power grab? Investigations into Musk's companies are vanishing. The FAA, DOJ, SEC, and CFPB all had active cases against Tesla and SpaceX, yet leadership shakeups and firings have silenced them. Regulators are being sidelined. Officials responsible for enforcing corporate accountability are removed, replaced, or stripped of power. ensuring Musk businesses remain untouchable. From stock manipulation to labor violations, every challenge Musk faces seems to dissolve. Is this because his companies are innocent, or because the system is being reshaped in his favor? Since Donald Trump entered politics, his political career has faced many significant challenges. While Trump had several resounding victories in past elections, in recent years his approval ratings have seen a noticeable decline. This is especially evident as his approval among key voter groups, like the younger generation, also starts to drop. The instability in his leadership and controversial decisions have eroded public trust in his ability to lead. In this context, Fox News, a media outlet closely aligned with Trump, has become an essential part of his strategy to protect and maintain his support. With strong backing from hosts like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson, Fox News has become a powerful tool for Trump to continue building his image and retain support, even though this support is gradually declining. However, developing these media strategies has not come without challenges, as there is increasing evidence of Fox News spreading misinformation and distorting the truth. Fox News has often been criticized for spreading inaccurate or unfounded information, especially concerning Social Security policies. A prime example occurred when Caroline Leavitt, Trump's press secretary, appeared on the show and claimed that tens of millions of deceased people are still receiving Social Security benefits. She made this claim based on data shared by Elon Musk about people over 110 years old still receiving benefits, despite the fact that these figures were not accurate. By exploiting this inaccurate information, Fox News attempted to create a frightening narrative about the Social Security system, sparking public concern about the national budget being wasted on deceased individuals. However, the reality shows that it is not uncommon for people over 100 years old to receive Social Security, and the numbers presented by Fox do not justify the existence of a widespread fraud as they attempt to exaggerate. While internal political issues grow more difficult, Fox News also seizes the opportunity to attack other countries, particularly Canada. With Donald Trump having previously threatened to annex Canada into the US, Fox News started focusing on the idea that Canada is betraying America when the country expressed disagreement with Trump's policies. Jesse Waters, a host on Fox News, portrayed Canada as America's enemy for criticizing Trump's foreign policies. However, it is hard to justify this perspective when Trump and others in the Republican Party have been the ones to openly mock and threaten Canada, making the relationship between the two countries increasingly strained. While Canada is simply defending its sovereignty and interests, Fox News attempts to portray Canada as a traitor to distract public attention from internal issues in the U.S. As international and domestic issues in the U.S. become more difficult, Fox News continues to highlight the glamorous moments of Donald Trump to shift focus. One of the moments they capitalized on was when Trump attended the Daytona 500, a famous car race. Despite having no notable political or diplomatic achievements, Fox News continually praised Trump as a global leader, simply because he drove the beast during a lap. This tactic by Fox News aims to divert attention away from more serious issues like inflation, unemployment, and the ongoing health crisis in the U.S. Instead of addressing these pressing issues, Fox focuses on Trump's flashy and attention-grabbing moments to downplay the public's concern. Not only does Fox News spread misinformation about social issues, but it also relentlessly attacks individuals and policies related to immigration. In particular, Trump and Fox News have targeted those advocating for legal immigration, such as AOC. Fox News has distorted AOC's statements about immigrant rights and has undermined America's commitment to providing humanitarian support to those in need. Through statements like, immigrants are taking American jobs, and immigration is a burden on the system, Fox News has built a divisive narrative, creating fear and division within society to protect Trump's immigration policies and create a media space where attacks on AOC become the center of discussion.